How freeze-drying preserves food. Freeze-drying is one of the techniques used by food industry movers and shakers to preserve food. And this has grown increasingly popular for a reason. Freeze-drying actually preserves food, although this remains very suspicious as a method for laypersons, since it is not often explained. You might be wondering how exactly freeze-drying preserves your food, and it is easily understandable if seen on the step-by-step perspective. The food industry is replete with strict standards of maintaining food's high quality by the time that it gets delivered to its end users, the consumers. As much as possible, the goal is always to recreate the same taste as at the time that the food ingredient has been freshly picked or created. The first step in freeze-drying is freezing. Of course, you cannot expect to preserve something if it is not solidly solitary to begin with. Freezing makes the whole bulk of the food a single unit, easily grouped into its considerable servings. The next step is the drying or dehydration of the food. The reason dehydrated food is the next step is because it is the promoter of easy transportation of food due to its lighter weight. The moisture in the food also adds to its perishability, so if the food is dehydrated first before being transported, it stands a better chance of being preserved. It also saves time and helps the transporters to bring in more supplies with a shorter time and space requirement in the vehicle, further reducing the risk of compromising the quality of the food being preserved. This method of preservation is not too far from the technique of drying flowers. Vacuum drying may be irrelevant in flower preservation due to its smallness, but in food preservation, a partial vacuum is actually beneficial. This partial vacuum equipment helps to sublimate the food, that is, turn the solids into gas to make sure it gets dried up until the customer manages to use the food at home and uses a heating machine to cook it. You might find that this is better preservation measure than the one that you use with flowers, but this is understandably so since we are dealing with food that needs to be consumed until its limit of perishability expires. Two stages of drying are used in food preservation, just to ensure the safety and extended guarantee on the food. The good thing about freeze-drying is that it keeps microorganisms from infiltrating your food. It will make sure that the food is squeezed shut from any other intruders. This way, you are ensured that it maintains the purity it had even when it has already traveled a long distance. You might be wondering how the sublimated food manages to restore itself after freeze-drying. When it is all set and ready for the customer to use, the food has its pores which respond to heat, your oven, Contact with the human body and your stove are good sources of this, and unfreezes and moistens the food back to its natural state.